Hey guys, welcome back to my small engine repair channel. I'm going to show you what's going on with the grinding noise on this snowblower. I'll take it in the shop. I'll show you how to fix it in less than 5 minutes and it won't cost you anything. So what you guys heard there, and many guessed it, is the starter, the electric starter to start up this engine. So what's going on, guys, that's causing this noise is that the starter is loose. I more often see this on Tecumseh engines because they vibrate more. So if you have a Tecumseh engine like on this snowblower here, you will need a Torx T30 or a 3/8 wrench. Now on these Tecumseh engines, there's 2 Torx bolts under here and they're also 3/8. That's why I mentioned you can use your Torx T30 or 3/8 wrench. And this is what often happens on these engines is the bottom bolts will get loose. Often they're missing. Fortunately, the bolts are still here. So all you have to do to fix this grinding problem today that I have is to just tighten up the 2 bottom bolts. Now, if you do have Loctite in your garage, by all means, put some on those bolts. If you don't have any Loctite, just make sure they're nice and tight. And what you want to do before the beginning of each winter is go over your engine and make sure that the starter bolts are nice and tight. What I see happen a lot is people don't tighten up these 2 bottom bolts. They vibrate and shake, the bolts fall out, and then the threads are stripped. And sometimes I've even seen parts of the block here or where the threads are for the bolts break right off, and you cannot even fix the threads anymore. And you can also check the 2 top bolts as well. They're shoulder bolts on most Tecumseh engines as well. So I've just put Loctite on the bolt here, and you don't need that much. And also be careful when you start the bolts back in because it's so easy to cross thread them. That's another thing that often comes in the shop are snowblowers with cross threaded starter bolts. And I'll tighten up the other one here. Now what I usually do after I get them started with the T30 Torx screwdriver is I go back with a 3/8 wrench because I have more leverage to tighten up the bolts. And again, just use common sense. We're not working on the space shuttle here. You don't want to over tighten them because you can easily strip the threads. And if you're missing these bolts, guys, they're 1/4 by 20. They're SAE bolts, 1/4 by 20, about 1/2 inch long. Okay, so I've got it plugged in and let's see how this starter works now. That works perfect now. I'll just turn it over without starting it now. So that starter's grabbing the way it should. There is no grinding at all. Now, fortunately, there's no damage to the teeth on the gear of this starter. This is what can happen if you don't keep your bolts tight. You can end up needing a new starter gear because it's not grabbing properly. It's just grabbing on the tips here and it will end up snapping the teeth on the gear. So here's an engine that I have apart here. I just want to show you closely what I meant by the gear not catching the flywheel teeth properly. So I've loosened the bolts on this starter just to recreate the problem. Now what happens when you push the button to start your engine is this gear comes out and it's supposed to engage in the flywheel teeth here. But if the starter is loose, what's happening is it's not grabbing the way it should and it'll just be skimming the teeth just enough to make a grinding noise and possibly break the teeth on the gear. So that's exactly what was going on that starter on the blower I just fixed. So you want to avoid that. Check the starter bolts all the time to make sure they're tight. So what I've done now is tighten up the starter. So now when you turn the starter on, the gear will come out and engage the flywheel just perfectly. You can see how deep the teeth from the starter gear goes into the flywheel teeth. So that's why when the bolts are nice and tight, you don't get that grinding noise. Now, some other damage you can cause by having a loose starter is not only to the starter gear, but also to the flywheel ring gear as well. Now, I've had snowblowers come in with loose starters, and because of that, the flywheel ring gear was so badly damaged that I had to replace the flywheel. So it can get quite costly if you don't keep up and keep your bolts tight on your starter on your snowblower. Now you will see more starters getting loose on the Tecumseh flathead engines than you will on the overhead valve engines on snowblowers. And the reason for that is because the overhead valve engines do not vibrate as much. And by the way, this is a Briggs & Stratton engine and the starter bolts are right here. They're T40 here as well. And on some MTD Power More engines, you will find the starter bolts right here. There's one here and one below. And these are 8mm heads. So as soon as you hear any grinding noise on your outdoor power equipment, check the starter bolts. If you don't, you may end up with expensive repairs. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you're subscribed and that you're following me on social media. All the links are below the video, and have yourselves a great day.